Hi, I'm Keegan Flegner. I'm 17 years old and I live in Santa Monica, California. When I was in first grade, I was diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. Since that time, sports have played a huge role in changing my life. So I want to show the world how all kinds of sports can help all kinds of people with all kinds of mental and emotional challenges. Welcome to Sports on the Spectrum. My guest today is Mark Ulrich. Mark was an assistant coach for the YMCA summer travel team. His enthusiasm for basketball and his players was so high that I always wanted to play my very best for him. Mark showed me that there is more than one way to coach teams successfully. Mark eventually became a coach for the girls basketball team at Santa Monica High School, which advanced deep into the CIF Playoffs. Mark demonstrated that it's never too late to pursue your passion in sports. Please join me in welcoming Mark Ulrich to Sports on the Spectrum. So I like to start off every interview by asking, what are your very first memories of sports? And they can be anything. They can be playing them. They can be watching them, whatever. Just like, what are the first things you remember about sports?
The first thing I remember about sports was when I was probably around 4 or 5, 6 years old, somewhere in there. And I remember that it was a way to congregate with the neighbors.
Okay.
So we lived in a cul-de-sac, and so there were kids that were older that were playing different kinds of games, football, whatever, out in the street. And so I remember that as an opportunity to go out and play with the other kids. But really, what I really remember, my first real rooted memory of sports was I grew up in a Black community. When I first went to elementary school, my brother and I were the only non-Black children in the entire school. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it was in kind of the Crenshaw area.
Right.
And, the kids like to play. And I was very fortunate that I had a basket at my house. And it was kind of in the back at the end of a long driveway on top of a garage. So it was kind of a private area. So I could spend hours playing basketball by myself and just kind of practicing for when I got to the playground. And so then when I got to the playground, I'd had some experience shooting and, dribbling and so on and so forth. And, so I remember that. And then my father was very, very strict. When I had to come home, we had to be, in our pajamas at the dinner table, basically ready for bed. And for me, I was a very rambunctious and a hyperactive kid. That was very difficult for me. So I would go to bed around 7 or 8 o'clock. Yeah, it was very difficult. And I remember that I had a little transistor radio. And I don't even know if you know what that is, but it's like a very small
sort of
radio.
do. Yeah, no.
It's a radio the size of a pack of poker cards. Very small.
Yep.
And I got the Laker games. And in those days, Chick Hearn was the announcer, and he was a very good announcer. And the key to him was that he was able to paint the picture of the game.
Right.
And in those days, there wasn't television.
Yeah, you didn't need to watch it. It's like
you didn't need to watch it. So I snuck that into my bed, 2-3 nights a week. And so I would listen to Chick Hearn announce the Laker games, as a kid. And so even though I wasn't out playing and I was in bed far too early, I had some entertainment. So when I would play basketball, I would recreate all the stars that I heard in my head from Chick Hearn. Right. And I would be those stars out playing by myself, and I would recreate the kind of the announcing of the game and, what I was doing in 3 seconds left. And I'd run in the house and I'd say, I hurt my finger, I need tape. And then my mom would be like, for what? And I would tape my fingers up like I was, Willis Reed and from the Knicks in those days. And I would go out and play. And so that I remember that very fondly.
Yeah, no. And I could understand why you would remember something like that very fondly. It's just like, it rings in your head for the rest of your life. So, and kind of also what you mentioned there about stuff like, looking like Willis Reed, and also, listening to Chick Hearn and the Lakers, it kind of leads into my next question, which were, while you were growing up, were there any specific, teams or players in any kind of sport that you idolized, and why was that the case?
Always the Lakers,
right.
because of my foundation of listening to that as a kid.
Yeah, I remember you tormented me on that when I was first being coached by you.
Yes, I think you brought a Clippers jersey or something.
Yes, and you were like mad. You were like, "We got to change that, Keegan. We got to change that."
Well, Laker Nation loves all the bandwagoners, so we want to recruit you in as much as possible.
Good luck with that. I'll just say that.
Okay. I liked a lot of the players. I mean, when I was a kid,
right,
my parents got divorced, and my mom really couldn't handle me at age 12, 13 years old. I was pretty much on my own. So I would play with the friends that were my age.
Right.
And then when they had to go home to dinner because their parents asked them I didn't really have to go home. So I would stay and I would play with the older kids. And so I played a lot of pickup basketball because the older kids and guys getting off work. And even though I was only 13, I was still playing with them. And so I would just pretend that I was, I liked a guy by the name of George Gervin, the Iceman.
Oh, I know who that is. Yeah.
And I used to pretend that I was him, and I would, play up and down the courts at Lincoln, ironically.
Oh, wow.
After school and at night. And so I would say George Gervin probably was my favorite to replicate.
Okay.
In those days. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like, he's a great player, obviously. And, there are a lot of other guys out there who I like, and I know other people like for similar reasons to you. It's like, they just like their game and stuff like that. And while they may not be the best, it's like, it doesn't matter. It's like they relate to them the most. So
it's just something about the free flow of it. Right. Because
absolutely.
I was kind of uptight a little bit. And so a little angry, as a kid. And so if I could channel that free spirit, then that would help me to try to kind of unwind myself a little bit. And it was basketball in those days for me growing up was a great escape from my life, from my reality. And so I was able to, channel a lot of that energy into something that gave me joy and, something that I could do.
Right. And it's actually interesting you mentioned that, because that kind of, I'd like to try and focus that picture about what you were just talking about there a little more, and kind of ask you, tell me about your time playing basketball, specifically in your teenage years. Why was it so important to you then? And what was that experience like? Like, I as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, you played both at the boys club in Santa Monica and later for the Santa Monica high school varsity team. And so I'd appreciate it if you could just talk about what that experience was like for you and why did it matter so much?
Well, again, sometimes I grew up with a single mom and there was just a lot of internal angst for me around that. My mom loved me, but, she was a single Hispanic woman in a mainly white, environment. And so we didn't have a lot of family friends and those types of things that are probably more common now. So I was on my own a lot. And so for me to be able to go to the boys club and, play with my friends from school, that was always important. And then, as I said, I spent a lot of time in the playground playing. And again, that for me, that was a huge escape. So playing at Samo High was just kind of a reiteration of that. And I had a lot of energy and I just loved playing all day and going home, exhausted and not really having to think about whatever issues I might have underneath, and just, relax and go to bed and feel like I've exercised a lot of the demons that were inside of me through sports.
Absolutely. It's like there's nothing that makes you feel better than knowing you've done something that both you love and you feel like is helpful to you at the same time. And at the end of the day, once you've completed that, everything else works itself out, and the whole experience just becomes all the more easier. So So I totally get
Yeah,
where you're coming from there.
absolutely.
And I guess
there's
now
a
I'd
tremendous
actually,
amount of
yeah,
joy
no,
in playing. You know, there's a tremendous amount of joy
absolutely,
in playing. So that was good.
absolutely. You know, that's the best part about basketball. It's like the people who play it, they actually genuinely love it. So it's like they never let it go. And I guess that kind of, speaking of never letting it go, I guess I kind of like to ask now, specifically turning to today, you know, I'd like to ask, what sports do you still play? And also, you know, what about them? What made you want to hold on to them so much specifically? And you can use basketball, but I guess I'd also ask, are there any other ones? And, you know, what exactly have you committed to today that keeps you involved in them at the same time?
So as far as fitness is concerned, I swim 4 days a week. And so I swim quite a bit. And I started swimming when I took my daughter to swim lessons. And I would see the parents sitting on the sidelines watching their kids. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. So I started swimming when she swam. And, you know, it just evolved. And, you know, 20 years later, I'm still doing it. So I do a lot of swimming. I love to ride the bike. I love to walk. So I hike this weekend. I love to walk along the beach. I run, not really.
Stay active.
Yeah, I'm very active. Yeah, I'm still very active. And again, it's just part of mental health.
I mean, you don't even have to run if you're doing all that stuff.
Yeah, and it's
like health. You don't have to run if you're doing all this other stuff.
Yeah, and
being
out in nature, being outdoors is I really love it. It's been a very good lifestyle.
Yeah, no, I definitely. Absolutely. I mean, for any person, if they could maintain that kind of consistency you have of just staying active, having that kind of lifestyle, I think they'd be just as happy as you are right now. Yes. I know I certainly would be, you know.
You will be.
So it's like I yes, but I definitely applaud you for being the first to show me that. So it's like at the same time, I have somebody to look up to and know it's possible. So
absolutely,
that's really great. I think now actually I'd like to focus now on specifically your time both as a coach at both the YMCA. Like I mentioned before, I'd played there for a long time, and then also at Samo High, which is a very good basketball program. You know, so to be a coach there means you must be doing something really well. So I'd like to kind of figure out what that is a little bit. But before we do that, I'd like to actually give a shout out to one of our sponsors. Do you own a classic Mustang, Corvette, Camaro, or Chevelle from the 1960s or 70s? Does the clock in your dash keep accurate time? Do you want to get a new clock for your car, but you don't want to pay $200, $300, or $500 for a new clock? Then go to ImpactAutoPartsStore.com for a brand new quartz clock that looks identical to the original and is powered by a single AA battery. All up prices less than half that of a reproduction or restored clock. Go to the website, ImpactAutoPartsStore.com, and keep on cruising. And so now, actually, I'd like to...
I love it. Good. That was great. Good segue. Very professional, Keegan.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, but
maybe I'll go look at one of those clocks.
Be my guest. You know, it's the business my dad runs, so it's like he'll appreciate it. Yeah.
All right.
But I think now, actually, I'd like to, like I said earlier, focus on specifically your time at both coaching at the Santa Monica YMCA and at the Santa Monica High School. So obviously, I've mentioned this so many times before when I've had certain guests on who have had similar importance to the league's history, you know, like Pete Arbogast, for example, Nikki Rederer I've had on, Zion Kurtman I had on in the last episode. So it's like, as a result, it just, and every time I've mentioned just how important it is to me, and I guess having all those people on shows why, including you. And I guess I'd like to sort of get your input on what you took away from it all. But before I do that, I actually have a quote I'd like to read from one of your longest assistant coaches. Well, technically you were his assistant for a while, but at the same time, you know, you both, I feel like we're on co-equal footing and obviously made a great team as a result. And that guy is Steve Rice. Now, I've never had him on the show, but I have had him quote for some of my previous guests, and hopefully someday I will get him on here. He's a great guy. I know my viewers and listeners will love him, but I have from him here about you. And these are his words, not mine. I have quote, I first met Mark in junior high school at what is now called Lincoln Middle School in Santa Monica, California, which I went to, by the way. So shout out to the Lincoln Lions. We played a lot of basketball together back in those days, both at school and at the boys club on Lincoln. We then went to Santa Monica High School, where Mark was a guard and key contributor to the men's varsity team. Mark and I are friends for life. So many years later, we decided to try our hand at coaching together at the YMCA in Santa Monica. Mark used his 4 seasons as a coach at the Y to return to the Santa Monica High School as a coach, helping lead the Lady Vikings varsity team to a city championship last season. What separates Mark as a coach is that he brings the same philosophy to coaching as he does to parenting, namely a tremendous amount of encouragement, enthusiasm, empowerment, and love. And so what's your reaction to that, I guess I'd ask quickly?
I think it's pretty accurate. I mean, I think that it's very nice of him to recognize that. And he was instrumental in getting me back into coaching at this stage in my life. And so I'm forever thankful for that, for sure.
Right.
You know, and he's also a parent of young kids. And so we talk about parenting since my kids are older and I've kind of been through it.
Right.
And the reality is, Keegan, is that, you know, a lot of moments in life that seem so long and so important are actually such short and fleeting moments.
Right.
And if you can remember the big picture, and by that, I mean, you know, you're going to coach a kid and he or she's going to be in a game and they're going to make a mistake. And, you know, as a coach, you have a great opportunity to contribute an attitude towards somebody making an innocent mistake or a mistake. And you can either empower them or you can kick them when they're down. Right. And unfortunately, a lot of coaches, you know, they get mad. But the way I always looked at it was 10 years later, when that game and that score and that nobody will ever remember, but the kid will always remember the mistake. Right. And the question is 10 years down the road, if that kid sees you, but you don't see him or her, will they rush over to say hello to you? Will they rush over to say, hey, coach, how are you? And give you a hug? Yes. And for me, that was always the answer in how I dealt with any mistakes or anything that kids might do that upset something. Right. Always deal in love. Right. And so Steve has it right. It's all about love, whether you're parenting, coaching. It doesn't matter what you're doing. If you come from love, then the big picture will always work out. And that's what's most important. It's not about each individual moment. Right. That's kind of been my philosophy. And you know, I think I have a gift with kids, and I think I'm able to motivate them and get them to trust me. And it's because I treat them as equals, and I treat them at the end of the day with love. I really want to treat them with love. And so I think they feel that. Yeah. And so it makes coaching great. It makes working with young people great because they have so much energy and so much to teach me and constantly teaching me. And no matter what hours or effort I put into coaching or working with kids, I always receive 100 times more, no matter what. Yeah. No matter what. It's just a gift. Yep. And, so, you know, I'm thankful for Steve that he asked me to assist coach with him one year, and I wasn't going to do it. And I ended up doing it. And I had wanted to be a coach when I was younger. Look where it's led you. Yeah. Well, I had wanted to be a coach when I was younger. In fact, I coached high school and I coached AAU basketball. But, you know, life got in the way and I ended up getting into business and so on and so forth. But it's been fantastic. It's just been a great experience. I've loved the Y. I mean, I've loved it. It was great. It is great. I'm going to do it again. Oh, so, yeah. Right. Maybe you'll be one of my assistants. I will definitely. Who knows? You know, it's like I've honestly been considering coaching for a little bit too. So it's like at the same time, if I could have you be my first mentor in that, I would certainly appreciate it. So yeah, it would be great. Yeah, you would love it because, you know, much of what you're doing here with this podcast and that you're trying to give to others and you're trying to expose others that may be having issues, that they can get around that and that they can do something that they maybe didn't think was possible for themselves or whatever, but you're trying to encourage. That's all that coaching is. And you know, you reach one kid, and you say something to them positive at the right time in their life when they need it. they always remember.
Absolutely.
They always remember. So,
I mean, I will say this, I certainly remembered a lot of what you told me when you were coaching me for a very brief time, which I would actually like to show a picture to you from that time. And it's interesting because you talk about brief. This was brief, but at the same time, I think for both of us, it left a lasting impact. And it's interesting too, actually, because that kid sitting with your arm around Zion, I had him on a couple days ago for the show, and he mentioned how much he loved being on this team. Like, even though it was so short. And basically for all the listeners out there, this is a picture of one of the summer league teams that the YMCA ran as sort of a travel us team that you were one of the assistants to, because my dad was the head coach, but at the same time he invited you to be his assistant. And as a result of that, I think it made the whole team so much better, and it left a very fun, lasting effect on all of us, including me and Zion, particularly, because we always talk about it. We always talk about how much fun that was, and how we wish it could have honestly lasted longer too. That was the other thing.
If we had any complaints about that was a great ball club.
If we had any complaints, it was too short.
How's he doing? How is he doing, Keegan?
He's doing well, as far as I know. He is playing football right now, actually.
Okay, at Samo.
Yeah, not at Samo, actually. He moved to Vegas.
Oh, you're kidding me?
Yes, he did.
Huh? No kidding.
Yeah. No.
Good for him.
Yeah. No. Okay. I mean, he seems to be having a fun time, so it's like I can't be mad, So
no,
it's like,
of course not. No, things happen.
Yeah. No.
Well, tell him I said hello if you talk to him again.
I will absolutely tell him you said hello.
Okay.
But anyway, I'd kind of like to focus a little bit more on coaching at the YMCA, and kind of once again start at the beginning and ask, how did you first get involved in that? Like, what made you choose to go to the Y, and what about it stood out to you at first? Like, what was the what was the thing that grabbed you the most?
So as I said, I had coached in my younger years, and it was a dream of mine to be a college basketball coach. It didn't work out, and it was fine. I had kids to raise and whatever, doesn't matter. So later in life, Steve is a close friend of mine, and he said to me, "Hey, I'm coaching at the Y." And he had just moved back to California from New York. So I hadn't been spending time with him, and he hadn't had his kids yet. And he said, it'd be fun. We can coach the kids and then go out after and have a bite to eat or whatever. And I said, oh, okay. So I went, and it was like, they say once you've learned to ride a bike, you'll always get back on the bike, and you'll know how to ride it. And it was just the minute that I started coaching, it just all came back to me, all of the passion of why I wanted to do it in the first place, and everything that I loved about it. I loved the kids. I thought it was a very funny collection of kids. And I remember, what is it called? Fortnite. It's called Fortnite, I guess.
Right. Yep.
The kids were doing all the Fortnite dancing. And I remember when first practice, I gave them the grocery store story, and I said, 10 years from now, I want you to see me and run to me and say, "Hey, coach." And so let's build our relationship from there. And I made them put all their phones away, and we were just able to concentrate for an hour on basketball, even though they didn't want to put their phones away. At the end of the day, at the end of the season, every single one of them, thanked us for the season that we'd had, and just had a wonderful time. So then I decided to do it again. And, then your dad asked me to help with the all-star team. And so then I did that. And then I took a team myself the next couple of years, and it was just wonderful. It's been a great experience. I love that the majority of the kids are local. I think with COVID, it's been very hard, and that I haven't seen a lot of kids, but I always look forward to seeing the kids that I've already coached, around town or whatever. Some of them graduate to high school to play high school basketball. And so I just love that part of it. I love the relationship with the kids. Love it.
No, one of those kids actually on that summer league team, Michael, if you remember him, he goes to high school with me. So we like to talk about that experience.
Michael, which Michael?
Michael Hill.
Oh yeah.
He was the other. Yeah. He's gotten really good, by the way. Really good.
Really?
So,
Good
yeah.
for him.
No, you'd actually be shocked to see how good. Yeah, no.
Really?
So, it's like, you talk about this,
You'll have
the
to
great
send
part
me
of
your
this all being
schedule,
local.
Keegan.
It's like, yeah, I will do that, man. Hopefully they'll allow fans. We'll see about that. But
That's
in the
right.
meantime,
That's true.
Once they
true.
are allowed, I promise I'll send you the schedule.
Well, send me the schedule anyways. You never
we've
know
had a
what
lot
happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no. We have a lot of fun, and it's like, you were talking about that local experience. It's like I still feel the effects of that every day, and it's awesome whenever I can run into my old teammates.
Yeah.
Especially considering I was there for so long, so it's like I know a lot of people.
Yeah, that's great. That's
but,
awesome.
It's still great. And so actually, obviously, kind of building off that part of you talking about how you've done this for a long time. It's obviously taken you a lot of great places. Like now you're coaching, varsity girls basketball at a great high school. So it's like, you must be doing something right. So it's like, and so as a result of that, I kind of like to ask you a little bit about what you think has made you become so successful. Like what does your coaching philosophy entail that you think makes it work so well? And like, did you take that away from any other coaches you saw specifically? It's like, what made you feel like you could do this really good? And what have you done specifically to make it really good?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, it's
a complicated one. I know.
It's a complicated one. I think I grew up in an era of, a much stricter, hard-nosed coach.
Right.
And so I would say to you, I learned what not to do.
Right.
You know what I mean? As a player, I know what I didn't like, and I know what didn't garner what I thought could have been a better relationship. And
right.
I think what makes me a good coach is that, first of all, I'm a stickler for details.
Yeah. Well, so am I. So I get where you're coming from.
Yeah. If we're going to do something, let's make sure that our feet are correct. Let's make sure that if we're on defense, as an example, let's make sure that we're all talking, and let's make sure that we're not just playing individual defense, but we're playing defense as a team. And what does that look like for people that are off the ball? And, it's a cohesiveness, and it's an attention to detail there. I think that, although I consider myself very easygoing and very kind, I'm also very passionate. And I think that comes off with a certain intensity that the kids follow, so I think that the kids play very, very hard. So I think that then translates into more competition for them in practice, which makes the games a little bit easier. They're used to competing.
Right.
And so I think those things all together, but really the basics of it is, Keegan, to be honest with you, that, the core of it is that I love kids, and so I think coming from that place enables me to get through to kids. And so they're willing to listen, and they're willing to hear what I have to say. I also allow them to discuss. I also am open to hear what they have to say. Right. I don't think that I know everything. And I don't think that they have to ultimately respect me because I'm the coach and they're the player. I don't believe that. I believe that it's something that it has to be mutually built equally on both parts. So they'll respect me if I respect them. I don't expect anything for free because of a title. So I think that works well with kids too.
Right. Yeah, no, well, I definitely think it's, I know for me, it's like I could feel that sense of, detail and love and all that stuff combined together coming off from you. And I think it had a very positive impact in the end on how I learned to play the game more. And for a lot of other kids, I'm sure that rang true too. And at the same time, I think for some of those kids who not only got to be coached from you at the Y, but also got to be coached from you later in the high school, I think it actually had a special effect on them. And I actually have another picture here I'd like to show you just to kind of reflect a little bit on what impact that it's been on specifically for who. So here I actually have a picture of you, Pete, and 4 of the girls who were among the best to play at the Y, who came through and later went to go on to the varsity team, and obviously were coached by you again. Yeah. And I guess I'd quickly ask it, like, first, like the girls in that picture, as well as any other girls that you both got to coach at the Y or just see them play at the Y and then later coach them on the team. What was that like for you?
It was amazing.
How could it have been different?
Well, so one of the things that I try to do is that I always try to look for the positive in a kid. Right. And I don't remember if you remember me specifically coaching you, but I remember, there was always, because your dad was coaching you, it was very difficult. And there was always, a little tension there in regards to how you performed. So if you performed well, you were good, but if you didn't, you could get upset or whatever. And so one of the things and I noticed right away that you had a tremendous cardiovascular motor, and that you were a very good runner. I noticed it. So what I focused on with you is I said, Keegan, what I want you to do as a big is I want you to run the court. And nobody's going to be able to keep up with you. And by the third and fourth quarter, whoever's trying to guard you is going to be so exhausted that they're not going to know which way is up. And you're just going to outrun them. And believe me, it's going to pay off coming down the road. And so you're going to become a runner. You're going to run from one basket to the other, up and down the court. And sure enough, when you started to do that, I noticed that you started to get more rebounds and you started to get more layups. And as you started to get into better condition, you started to get more physical under the basket. And everything started to grow from that piece, which to me as a coach was so simple to see and to focus on, because I knew it was something that you could do. And so it was simple. It wasn't, hey, you need to put your hand up higher on the shot and your follow through is not correct and your body is not balanced and you're dribbling too high or you've got to use your left hand. It was something more simple that I knew would have a building block for you and something that I knew you could do. So I immediately jumped into that after watching you. So, you bring up this picture. And it's actually 2 Y kids. It's interesting. Yeah. So one of the girls in that picture, I would talk to the kids and I wouldn't just talk to them about basketball. I would say, because we're doing 5 days a week and so on and so forth. And so I started talking to them about grades and their home life and their social life and, what else was happening in their life. And I found out that one of the kids was actually living in a trailer home in Santa Monica. One of the Y kids. And her parents were divorced and her mother lived in San Pedro. Her father lived in the motorhome place. She was working almost full time at the pier and working late at night in the cold, playing basketball, trying to get good grades to go to college. And, she was a little bit overweight. She wasn't meeting her potential as a basketball player. Her teammates were a little bit upset with her and she was a little bit upset with herself. But what very few people knew was that 3 nights a week, she would get out of practice at 7 or 8 o'clock at night and have to drive with her mother all the way to San Pedro to go to stay with her mother and then drive back. And so she wasn't getting any sleep. And then on the nights that she wasn't doing that, she was working at the pier until midnight. And so what do you do with a kid like that? The other coaches are like, you got to get in better shape. You got to, blah, blah, blah. And so what I did with that kid was what I reiterated with her all the time is I said, listen, what you're going through now, I know is very difficult. I know it's affecting your basketball. I know it's affecting your sleep, your physicality. It's affecting your grades. I understand all of that, but I am telling you as somebody who had a similar experience in life, that all of this that you're having to do is going to pay off for you in the long run. And she would say, Mark, coach, what are you talking about? I mean, it's not going to, I'm not going to, blah. I said, trust me, it's going to pay off because while you're driving to San Pedro and back, while you're at the pier at midnight working in the cold, all of your peers are tucked into their little beds. Their parents have put them to sleep. They've had a nice warm dinner. They've gotten 8 to 10 hours of sleep. They woke up in the morning. If they had trouble with their math class, they had a tutor. Nobody's helping you.
Right.
I said, and what's going to happen one day in business is that there's going to be a project that's going to need to be done, and everybody's going to be crying about working long hours and not being able to do it and this, that, and the other. And you're going to be so used to working beyond the limits that you're going to take it on, and you're going to be the star. You're going to be the one that's doing it. When you have your own apartment and all these other kids that have had everything handed to them have their own apartment, and the washing machine goes out and you don't know what to do, and you run, you've got to feed yourself and you blah, 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 blah. I said, you're the one that's going to know what to do. Right. You're the one that's going to have the courage to go and do that. So I kept encouraging and emphasizing what to her was so difficult in her life and made her depressed.
Right.
As a positive.
Yep.
And I cannot tell you the phone calls that I get from that girl who's in college now and says, Coach, you have no idea some of the things that you said to me. You have no idea how that helped influence me and how that kept me going and how that, and so the other day I'm at Lincoln and it's nighttime, and there's one of the boys that I coached. If you remember, I used to, on the All-Stars after you left, I would take some of those boys that couldn't afford to be in the program, that were the right age, and I would put them on my team. And I would have them practice with us. And then I would put them on the team. I would pay for their membership. I wouldn't tell them. I'd just take care of it. But anyway, blah, blah, blah. And it made our teams better. It made everything more fun. And it gave some of these kids a break. So I see this kid over here, and he says, Coach, one of the kids that I had brought over. How are you, Coach? And da-da-da. He goes, don't worry. I've already had my vaccine. This kid's 15 years old. I go, how do you have your vaccine? He says, well, I live in a senior home. He says, my dad is the janitor. And so they give us a free room. And so that's where I live. And so can you imagine this kid, 15 years old, every night goes home to a senior home? You ever been in one of those senior homes? They're terrible.
Yeah, I know.
They're awful. He's 15 years old. So now I understand his situation. So now I'm doing the same thing with him that I did with this girl. And I'm telling him, here you are out here practicing at Lincoln. It's cold. It's about 7 o'clock. It's dark, but you're still practicing. I said, you know where all your guys you're competing against are? They're home. They're relaxed in a warm bed somewhere. They're watching TV. This is your advantage. And so now he and I are starting to work on drills. But again, it's taking the negative that a kid is going through and trying to create a positive for that kid, so that later in life he has something, and at that moment he has something to stand on. And the beauty of the why for me is that these kids are local. Do you see what I mean? So I get to see them and say, hey, what's going on? Oh, wow, I didn't know that. Now I know. Now I know why the kid was angry at 13 and 14 and why the other kids didn't want to play with him. Of course he's angry. Why wouldn't he be?
Exactly.
But he was a good, I liked him to play defense in basketball. I liked that anger. I just had to coach it. And he wasn't easy to coach. But so again, the thing I love about the Y is that it's local and that I get to see the kids growing up. And I get to try to influence them, just not only at that brief moment at the Y, but later in life.
No, absolutely. You bring all these things together at once and it totally makes sense where you're coming from with every single bit of it, honestly. And I'll be totally honest, for that entire span of like 5 minutes right there, you had me hooked. It's like, I was just locked in listening, and I'm pretty sure all my other listeners and viewers do, because the way you told that, it was just like, it makes all the sense in the world. And at the same time, it puts everybody in a phase where they learn something very valuable in it, just in that single moment. And so I think for a lot of people, they're going to look back on what you said right there and feel the same effect for themselves that those two people you mentioned there had. So I think that's very helpful to hear. And so now, actually, I know we're getting short on time, so I only have a couple more questions to ask. But before I do, I'd like to give a shout out to another one of our sponsors.
Are you looking to boost your SAT score by at least 360 points? Whether your goal is the SAT, ACT, AP classes, or general test preparation, turn to Sam's Tutoring Company. Sam is a Caltech educated tutor with over 17 years of experience teaching over 700 students of all ages. Whether you want to learn in person or remotely, Sam is ready to help you accomplish your academic goals. Call Sam's Tutoring Company. If you mention the promo code SportsSpectrum, you'll receive 25% off the price of your first session.
And so now, actually, with these last couple of questions, I want to focus a little bit more on the spectrum aspect of this show. And obviously, I know you personally don't have as much experience with that, but I know you still probably—
You'd be surprised, actually, Keegan.
I know. But I would at least imagine you at least have opinions on this stuff. And I think I'd like to let you share that. And so I'll start by asking this very simple question first that I start every segment of the show off with for all my guests, which is the question: when you hear the term mental health, what pops into your head? What does it mean to you?
Well, that's a very good question. So mental health, well, I'm extremely fortunate in that at a young age, especially considering the environment that I grew up in, I understood the value of mental health and trying to deal with the pain that's inside of you,
right?
In a professional way. And so I, as I said, I had a very rough childhood, and
right.
I had a lot of anger. And so by getting therapy and going to psychoanalysis and myself, I was able to learn the value of real professional mental health help. And unfortunately, when I grew up and most of the time, people looked at mental health. If somebody had a mental health issue, it was considered a weakness, and it was especially for men. And it was considered, well, you're soft, or, you can't handle it, or, you're just not tough enough. And it can't be further from the truth. It's actually the opposite. If you have the courage to deal with mental health, then that shows real strength. And I think that your generation, the generation of the guys that are in the NBA today, that are in sports today, people are talking about it, whether it be Kevin Love or these guys, LeBron James. It's just amazing to me how the tide is turning. It hasn't turned completely, but how it's turning. So we have a lot of homeless around us, right? So homelessness. And so some of that is really mental health, right? These are people that for whatever reason couldn't get help to balance what was going on inside of them chemically. And a lot of it is not their fault. They just didn't get the proper help. And, it's just really unfortunate that we don't do a better job in this country or in this world around mental health. So for me, it's a very loaded subject.
Yeah, no, I definitely have seen a similar image in my head and in the heads of others appear when they're asked this question and, what mental health means to them. So I totally get what you're saying there. And I guess I'll kind of combine a couple of questions I had for you and turn them into one big one to kind of finish this off. And, and I'll kind of lead off the fact that you mentioned, the tide is turning and stuff like that. And it certainly is, no doubt about that in my mind. But at the same time, there are still people who, either don't like this whatsoever, or maybe just don't know about it as much. And so my question to you is, based on your experiences, specifically with coaching sports, playing sports, and as a result, interacting with at least some athletes like myself who deal with this stuff, and you've seen what sports does to them, and also just like what impact it has on them and what they might be like, in a place like playing sports, just based on everything you've learned in your life, what do you really want people to know about this kind of stuff? Like, what do you think they should know that you know?
In regards to mental health?
Well, yeah. And just, it's like what an impact sports has had on people like that, like me, for example. It's like, what have you seen from that?
So my experience is that in the sports world,
Mm-hmm.
and that world can contain a 10-year-old,
right,
playing in his backyard by himself,
mm-hmm.
to professional athletes or Olympic athletes around the world. The sports world
right
attracts
mm-hmm.
a lot of individuals that have mental health issues.
Right.
The reason is because it's a great way. It can be a great way
mm-hmm.
to put a Band-Aid on your feelings.
Right.
You can put a Band-Aid on your fears. You
mm-hmm.
can put a Band-Aid on your anger.
Right.
You can put a Band-Aid on your restlessness. You can put a Band-Aid on your confusion through
mm-hmm.
sports.
Right.
Right. It creates an environment where you can spend a lot of hours thinking
mm-hmm.
about something outside of whatever it is that's bothering you. You can exert yourself physically
mm-hmm.
to deal with the angst or the anger or the frustration that's inside of you.
Right.
And it can come out in different sports like wrestling or football or basketball or volleyball or running. It doesn't matter, but it can be a great way to avoid really looking deep into the issues. The irony is that if we could get our society, and especially
mm-hmm.
our kids, to understand that if they're sometimes you'll have a kid that's very successful in football, as an example, or whatever. And the kid will think that the anger that he or she has inside of him is what helps him to be so aggressive and physical.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want to lose. They kind of don't want to lose that edge. As crazy as that sounds, it's true.
Right.
But the irony is that they don't have to lose that aggression
mm-hmm.
or that physicality if they deal with what the anger underneath it is. Mm-hmm. And in fact, they can be, if they're more clear-headed emotionally, they can be even clearer physically.
Yeah.
So what I would say to kids and to coaches is to be aware of mental health issues,
mm-hmm.
to really, if you see it, you see the potential of it, really try to deal with it and treat it. Mm-hmm. Working with girls this year mm-hmm. has been last couple of years has been an incredible mm-hmm. journey mm-hmm. into that part of it, because girls have other issues that
mm-hmm.
that a majority of boys don't. Right.
Exactly.
And so you have to be cognizant of that as a coach, mm-hmm. and you have to be open to hearing about that, and you have to be open to making tough decisions around reporting mm-hmm. and getting help for these kids.
Yeah, no.
It's not an easy situation, believe me. And again, I highly recommend sports. Right. But I think that you and I need to have a part 2 to this conversation, because we could go a lot deeper, because I didn't even tell you about coaching girls. Right. And I also didn't tell you about my experience in having a sports camp mm-hmm. For autistic children.
Well, listen, man, I think that would be a great thing to talk about. And I guess I will then officially announce to all our listeners and viewers, stay tuned for a part 2 of this interview as we continue. Okay. And I will certainly make sure we do it soon, man. But in the meantime, I'd just like to say thank you so much for being on here for part 1. I had a great time with you, and I know all our viewers and listeners did too. I'm sure they're just as excited as I am to hear you talk again about everything else you have to share, because I mean, it's clear you still have more that I think everybody could benefit from. So very excited for that. But in the meantime, I'd also like to thank our subscribers and listeners for joining us today. If you'd like to look and see more great content, then please go to our website at www.sportsonthespectrum.net. And then for all of you out there, please make sure to follow the 3 rules of life, which are stay safe, have fun, get dirty. And I will see you all on the next episode of Sports on the Spectrum. And in the meantime, I'm Keegan Flegner saying so long.
Thanks, Keegan.